Hey, it's John and Justin here again for Developer Day number 9.
Today we're going to talk about some of the unexpected problems we've run into in the past few weeks. And we're going to start with S3. While working on our new data pipeline, we noticed that the more objects we put into S3, the slower it got, both for reads and writes. And that was kind of a big problem. It was really unexpected. It turns out that we were using sequential keys, and when you use sequential keys with S3, it overloads some of their indexes and it can't balance things well. So just a simple solution that they recommended: do an MD5 hash on the key and prepend 4 characters at the beginning, pseudo-random, and that worked out really well. We got the performance we were expecting after that.
Yeah. Another thing we found is, if you remember it was last week or a couple weeks ago, we talked about Neo4j and the spatial stuff. Within Neo4j, using that XDCR plugin or whatnot, we were going for really high concurrency, a lot of transactions, a lot of things happening on the database at the same time, and we found out that the plugin for spatial database stuff is not written for concurrency. So if you have 2 things modifying the same part of the R tree at the same time, you get corruption. And not just like a little bit of corruption, but like a lot of corruption, such that the whole database is unrecoverable and you got to start again. Yeah. So the only solution we had to that was go a concurrency of 1, which slows things down. So we are currently essentially rewriting some of the implementation there to allow for higher concurrency.
And you'll probably hear more about that in the future. Yeah. A different problem is that micro EC2 instances on in AWS get throttled. Yeah. They're designed to allow for burst of activity, but not consistent. And so we had some problems with that, especially when we had an API running on it. Sometimes it would get throttled, and the connection with the database would get messed up, and we had some users run into that. So we're not using micros anymore for anything in production.
Yeah. Another thing we found having to do with connections is RDS connections. So Justin was pounding millions and millions and millions of pieces of data in through our API, and I was doing authentication on that, validating every request for each request. And I was calling Amazon's RDS service, MySQL service, for that, and just saying, is the key good? Is the key good? And they have a limit of about 35. So when Justin was processing thousands of requests per second, I couldn't handle that and just failed. So we rewrote that using Couchbase and Memcache, which doesn't have those same connection issues, and it disappeared.
Very nice. We have a fun issue here with floating point numbers in JavaScript. I don't know if you've ever worked much with those. They're pretty insane. I'll show you why. So here's a simple thing. 0.1 plus 0.2, does it equal 0.3? No, it does not, because 0.1 plus 0.2 is actually 0.3000004. So that caused us a lot of problems when we were comparing longitudes and latitudes as floating point numbers in JavaScript. And I hope you never have to deal with those, because it pretty much stinks.
Yeah. Another thing, some more things we learned. When we were doing a lot of heavy load on our APIs, Justin was getting some weird 504 errors. And he was going, I'm not giving those, and he's not generating. So we were trying to figure out what it was. Turns out Cloudflare, when they do some rebalancing or switching on their caching and their servers, and they give out 504 gateway errors. So that was an interesting thing we found out. Had to make some modifications around. Another thing we found is an HTTP error 520, which we never heard of before, and we went to look it up and it didn't exist. But it turns out it does exist just for Cloudflare. Essentially it means, I don't know what happened. So we think
Unknown cache error.
Yeah, it's an unknown cache error. We think what happened was there was a DNS issue and we were sending connections around in circles, but we'll never really know because we
only seen that one.
Yeah, we've seen it once, so I was like, okay.
So S3 has an interesting thing called a lifetime policy, which allows you to say any object I put into S3 automatically expires after a given amount of time. That's really useful if you're storing stuff like logs that you want to rotate automatically. Or also you can say, if you want to clear out all the objects in a bucket, you can set it down to the lowest, which I think is 1 day, and then they get cleared out because doing it one at a time is really, really slow. Well, so we needed to delete some test data, so we set a lifetime policy of 1 day to expire all that stuff. And then we forgot about it, and we lost some real data due to it. So that slowed us down about 2 days.
Yeah, regenerating all of that data. That was fun. Another little thing. When I was working with the spatial stuff, I had to make some tweaks to get a few things to compile correctly in Java. And I was running the test suite for what I was doing to make sure that I didn't break anything. And it turns out that one of the dependencies of what I was building had been updated recently, and they had left a print line, a print statement in there. And my tests were generating, tens of thousands of nodes in Neo4j, and for every single one of those nodes, I would get print statements, multiple print statements sometimes. And needless to say, it generated about 500 megabytes worth of data when I was trying to do my debugging, and it was not very fun. I had to write something to actually remove all of that so I could see what my actual output was, which was just about 500 lines. So,
one last issue is that this is the second time we've recorded this segment because Camtasia just lost 5 minutes of our previous recording. That was unexpected.
Yes.
Well, thanks. This has been Justin and John. Thanks for listening to Developer Day number 9. We'll see you next week.
Take care.